They asked me if I would be willing to go out and take another look at it and talk to people I knew there. I left there telling them that if they wanted, I would be able to free up my schedule. They subsequently called me and said, please do. I'd spent the 8 days there drinking mint tea and talking to everybody there was to talk to who knew anything about the subject matter in Niamey. And I'd come back persuaded that could not have happened. One, from a business perspective, because of the way the consortium was structured, you just couldn't do it without a lot of people knowing. And two, the way the government bureaucracy was structured, you could not make the decision without a lot of people knowing. And if you made the decision would be reflected in a series of signatures on the documents. And if the documents did not contain those signatures, they could not be authentic government of Niger documents.
The president quoted a British paper. We did not know at the time. No one knew at the time in our circles. Maybe someone knew down in the bowels of the agency, but no one in our circles knew that there were doubts and suspicions that this might be a forgery. Of course, it was information that was mistaken.
Now, given what I knew about where the question had originated, and given what I knew about the way the government works, I knew that people in her circle did know.
Based on thorough analysis, the IA has concluded, with the concurrence of outside experts, that these documents, which form the basis for the reports of recent uranium transaction between Iraq and Niger, are in fact not authentic.
Numerous French words were misspelled in the documents. One of the letters was signed by a Niger official who had left office 10 years ago. Several dates in the documents did not match the day of the week. Several of the names and titles of officials mentioned in the documents were incorrect.
We all know that the documentation on Yellow Cake from Niger was a fake, but why doesn't anybody say who did it, who faked the document? And why don't we take another look then at the same stream of consciousness that was prevailing at that moment on the aluminum tubes and even the trailers, the bioweapons trailers that were so ballyhooed. At that point, someone's got to say, who is putting this intelligence out there and why? And I don't think that question's been answered, and maybe because the answer is known and it's not a pleasant one.
Who was it that asked for this review of the Niger nuclear material question? It was the Vice President. Mr. Wilson, former ambassador, was sent to Niger in response to the Vice President's questions about this issue. So assumedly, the Vice President got a report back in response to his question, and that report contained the Wilson memo, his assessment of the situation.
The question remains, who did the document? Who forged the document? And why? The list is possibly short. Somebody ought to be able to work on that.
Wilson says his family is the subject of a smear campaign by senior administration officials. They deliberately leaked his wife's identity as a covert CIA operative, damaging her future career and compromising past missions, after he criticized the administration on Meet the Press and in the New York Times.
The White House hatchet men came out and started writing articles in which they basically said that Wilson, the first one came out and said that Wilson told the truth because he's a Democrat. Set that up as an argument. Democrats tell the truth, ergo Republicans fill in the blank. Then a couple of senior administration officials leaked to Bob Novak that my wife was a CIA operative involved in the weapons of mass destruction business at the CIA.
Senior administration officials is a key to being it's typically the president, vice president, cabinet officers, and the top of the White House had gone out of their way to get that information out. Not only told Novak, told Time magazine, they wanted that information out. Now, that's against a statutory law that prohibits the identification of CIA operatives.
What you're doing when you expose a CIA officer of any name, you're basically taking their entire career and flushing it down the toilet.
It also has the potential of placing that person in jeopardy because of their operations and their own operations and people they have operated with in jeopardy. So it was a very vengeful act against the ambassador to try to hurt him by hurting his wife's career, if not wishing for physical damage. I had never seen a dirty trick that could be a hit.
A president of the United States and an administration who has come to office on a platform of restoring dignity and honor to the White House. What they did was neither dignified, nor was it terribly honorable, nor was it germane to the issue at hand.
It is fair to say that the Iraq War was a diversion from the war on terrorism. It certainly meant that people weren't paying as much attention to Afghanistan as they should have, and the resources that might have gone to Afghanistan ended up being focused more in Iraq.
If you attack another country with no justification, people are going to say, wait a minute, this isn't a war on terrorism, this is a war on this is imperialism, this is colonialism, you know. And this is why it's a distraction, because you need the help of these people. If you get this view that the CIA and the FBI are lurking around the bazaars and the souks of the Middle East and handcuffing people or assassinating, that's not the way the world works. You've got to have the help of the locals to identify these people and either put them in jail or remove them from positions where they can do harm.
In January of 2002, as I was sitting in the bunker of the U.S. Embassy in Kabul, Afghanistan, and I and several colleagues were sitting around the one little working TV, and lo and behold, here came the infamous statement of the axis of evil, you know, Iraq, Iran, and North Korea. And we all looked at ourselves and went, oh my God, you know, here we are kind of in ground zero of Afghanistan. And Washington's talking about and talking in very belligerent terms about these other three countries, and we don't have Afghanistan anywhere close to being settled.
The only person Saddam was a threat to at this point, as we saw when the army collapsed, was to Iraq. He didn't have weapons of mass destruction. He wasn't scaring anybody. He certainly wasn't scaring the Iranians or the Turks or the Saudis or anybody else. It was a state that was on the verge of failure. Now it is a failed state. Failed states cause terrorism. You know, you can name them. Afghanistan, Lebanon, Somalia. Anytime you create a vacuum, it's where people flock to or discontented to fight wars.
The only real connection is that having invaded Iraq, we are very likely to make it a focus of terrorism. We are likely to produce what the president has said Iraq represents, namely the central battlefield in the war on terrorism. Why? Because we've sent a lot of Americans into a place where they're sitting ducks for people who think the only good American is a dead one.
"22 people were killed in the attack. About an hour ago, a massive car bomb ripped out the corner of the building here, and the casualties are still coming out."
Iraq cannot be governed by Americans. I don't care what the intention is. I don't care if we truly want to build a democracy. It cannot be ruled by a foreign power.
We, as the one indispensable nation of the world, as we characterized ourselves for so long in the last administration, cannot contemplate that possibly someone else might not like everything we call the American way of life, and that they would, in fact, welcome us into their countries. This may not be the case.
The only tool in the toolbox of the Bush administration is military force. Military force is a very blunt instrument. It just doesn't work. We've created more terrorists in Iraq, and we haven't even solved the problem in Afghanistan.